So I recently put up a post on Instagram regarding stiffness and the constant conversation around stiffness in the strength and conditioning world and physical training realms. Now, stiffness is talked about in a way for us to improve the speed of a movement on the ground and the efficiency and effectiveness of how we use energy when we're talking about it with regards to jumping, sprinting, plyometrics, all things kind of dynamic locomotion. We have to consider that there isn't just one way to attack it. Now, when we're looking at what's being posted online, there is a lot of information around stiffness with regards to how we improve the physical or physiological properties of tissue. Now, that might be muscular, it might be tendon, it could be a mixture of both the muscular tendinous unit and how they work in sync. What's often being discussed is very singular in a way that we are just attacking improving the structural capability of that tissue. And we fall short here because what you then see from that is people attacking what might be seen as the lowest hanging fruit with regards to improving that tissue quality. So the example here could be, let's use a pogo leap or a two-footed bouncing action on the spot where we can chase high volumes of landings or a high number of repetitions by doing a sub-maximal form of these movements. Now, the research does suggest that in order for us to get a larger change physiologically with tissue adaptations, that we should chase more sub-maximal, higher volume work. Now, where I come in here, and I think my stance on this looks at how stiffness is not a singular individual thing that we can attack. It is far more global in the way that we should attack that. We do have the physiological changes that we want, for sure. Everybody wants that. Now, where everyone falls short is we are now building stiffness with regards to a certain level of force that the body is exposed to. So let's say that you are using a pogo leap on the spot and you are jumping up and down. Now let's say that is 3 times body weight upon landing and you're able to do that in 0.21, 0.22 of a second. Now what happens to that individual or that tissue and how well they can deal with that load or how well it can deal with that load when body weight loading? Let's say we try and jump higher. Let's say we try to jump higher and reduce the time on the ground. Does the stiffness transfer in that tissue? The likelihood is no. It may transfer to a slight degree, but are you going to look as good within the stiffness equation for the submaximal movements as you are in more of an intense movement? This part of the conversation is really important for us to look at. Are you able to create stiffness at a varying level of amplitudes in the movements that you're doing? So you must look at it in a way that, well, if I want to be able to maintain stiffness in the tissue just on a physiological level, then I must be exposed to different amplitudes of movement. It can be very, very light on the spot stuff. Great. How does that relate to your sport? Maybe your sport is very horizontally based. Maybe you are a heavily acceleratory based athlete. Let's say that you are a wide receiver and a lot of the routes that you have to run start in static acceleration. Now, acceleration requires an enormous amount of ankle stiffness, but does the ankle stiffness that you've been working on translate? Does a standing on the spot bilateral movement translate to pivoting over that foot and having to traject your body forward? It may or may not. Now, I think that's the important part, is that let's say that we require stiffness in heavy deceleration movements. Do these tissue adaptations cross over to a multitude of different movements? Now, I think that we've been selling ourselves short with this and telling ourselves or telling others that it will cross over and you will get this global effect. The second layer of this relates to the skill that is required to stiffen and control the deformation of major joints when we move. So when you put your foot in the ground, do you lose position at the ankle, the knee, or the hip? The likelihood is that you will lose a little bit of position and you will absorb a little, because we want to get maybe a stretch on certain tissues that is going to give us back some projection of energy. And it's going to help with how we then leave the ground, move in a certain direction, and so on. Now, obviously, we do want the tissue to be stiff from a physiological point of view, but the skill acquisition side of timing things effectively, of anticipating what's about to happen on a given landing. So if you are, let's say that you are taking off on one leg and you're looking to land, let's say 2 or 3 meters in front of you, 2 or 3 yards in front of you, hit the ground, take off again, and minimize maybe leakage of energy, maximize the amount of velocity that you're carrying in. If you cannot anticipate what's about to happen, the likelihood is that you will not maintain a high level of stiffness that's going to carry you through and maintain the energy and velocity that you're already carrying. So it becomes a learned skill when your brain has to already know what's going to happen with regards to how fast you're traveling and what that next landing is going to feel like. Your brain also needs to register what is that force actually like, because we all may think that we know what that force is going to feel like, but actually it might not be what we quite thought. It might be higher, it might be lower. Now, when we have that reception of force, what can we do with that? Can we stiffen? Can we stabilize? And can all those muscles kind of sing at the same time in conjunction with each other and simultaneously contract and enable us to stiffen, stabilize, pivot over the foot, and carry on? If not, then we either completely drop into a lower position, we lose position at the ankle, knee, or hip, we bleed energy, or we bail out of it completely. And when we bleed energy and we do have a much lower joint position, it may be that we have far less trajectory out of the next movement. With most dynamic movement, we do want to have some form of loading, but we also want to carry speed as much as we can and use previous momentum as effectively as possible. Us humans like to do that. As soon as we have to create momentum, it becomes a lot harder for us to either maintain velocity or to, let's say, jump further or displace our body further. So there has to be two sides of what we're trying to achieve. And when I attack it, I look at the skill-based parameters and the physical-based parameters. Now, achieving great joint stiffness requires a whole host of different amplitudes of movement. It requires a highly learned proprioceptive base of where you are in space, understanding what it feels like to be traveling slightly backwards. Maybe you're moving forward really horizontally. Maybe you're moving horizontally but with a higher trajectory. Do you understand where you are in space? Can you navigate what's about to happen and how that then turns into anticipation? And this comes from a large volume of high variable landing and takeoff based patterns. That you could be moving off one leg, you could be moving off 2 legs. It could be in a split stance. It could be from one leg to the other on a single leg. It could be just using one leg and hopping. And this high variability over time creates this smorgasbord of skills for us to understand where we are in space, how to anticipate what's about to happen, and then how to stiffen and allow that signal between the brain and the limb to happen at a rapid rate, and for us to deal with that incoming force, velocity, and speed. And then we can deal with that and move on into the next movement. So we've got to make sure that we have a range of amplitude of different movements. We've got to make sure that we have a lot of variability. And with that, we can create a much greater stiffness equation for ourselves or our athletes. So I hope you took a lot from that. And I hope that you can now use that when you're looking at what you're trying to do, when you're trying to achieve greater stiffness. Stiffness is a strange term because it's a very, it's steeped within physics, and it is about trying not to lose position and deform as much as possible. Now, obviously, that's not completely always there for a human being. we do have to deform slightly. That's how our tissue gives us energy. That's how we get that stretch and release of energy within our soft tissue. So it isn't always perfect. We do still want to maintain levels of stiffness, and you have to understand that building it has two sides to it: physical and skill acquisition parameters. Hope you enjoyed this. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, like, and follow me on Instagram. Appreciate it.